Hello everyone and welcome back to CamTech. My name is Kyle and today we're going to be going over the basics of computer hardware. We're going to be going over from things like the actual components themselves to the screws that you might see in the actual build and the connectors and where they plug into it and such like that. This build is generally going to be for the people that know the difference between like a monitor, computer, and their peripherals, but they don't know the actual components and what it actually takes to build and like repair a computer. So let's just get right into it. So let's get it started with one of the more important parts of the computer, and this is going to be one of the main core components that you actually need to build a computer, not one of the extra things that you could do to modify it, and that's going to be the CPU or the central processing unit. It is often referred to as the brain of the computer, and it plays a vital role in executing instructions and performing calculations that power various tasks and operations. It's essentially the component that carries out the instructions provided by software programs, and manages the overall operation of the computer. A little breakdown of what a CPU does is instruction execution. The CPU executes instructions from a software programs which are stored in memory. These instructions can be anything from basic arithmetic to complex tasks like opening files, running applications, etc. CPUs have these things called cores and threads in them. Modern CPUs have multiple cores. Pretty much all CPUs you're going to find nowadays that are slightly modern are going to have two or more cores. Or if you, for consumer parts, you're going to find anything with four cores and above. But in like a business application, you can still find systems with only two cores and possibly some with one core. But I haven't even found one. I haven't even found any CPUs that only have one core nowadays that are actually being used. So your your mileage may vary on what you could find, what CPU cores are actually in the system, but they're pretty important. Having multiple cores allows the CPU to work on multiple tasks simultaneously, improving overall system performance and multitasking capabilities. A core is a separate processing unit within the CPU that can independently execute instructions. Now onto threads. Threads are a little bit more abstract, but are closely related to cores. A thread represents an independent sequence of instructions that can be scheduled for execution by a core. In a multi-threaded CPU, each core can handle multiple threads concurrently, allowing for even more efficient multitasking and parallel processing. There's this thing called multi-threading that involves threads. A CPU that supports multi-threading can execute multiple threads on a single core, effectively stimulating additional cores. This improves overall performance by making better use of available resources and reducing idle time on the CPU. When you're going to be looking at CPU documentation on like Intel or AMD's website, or when you're buying a new CPU for like your personal computer, you're gonna see a thing called clock speed. The clock speed of a CPU, measured usually in gigahertz, within older CPUs it's gonna be in megahertz, determines how many instructions a CPU can execute in a given amount of time, basically. Higher clock speeds generally lead to faster performance, but other factors like architecture and efficiently also play probably a bigger role than actual clock speed. Generally, nowadays you could find in like Intel 12th gen, 13th gen, Ryzen 5000 series, and Ryzen 6000 series, you can be finding CPUs generally 4 plus range gigahertz, so 4 to like 5.3, I believe, or around there generally. And as well, there's overclocking as well, but we're not going to be going into that today. But clock speed generally tells you how fast your system can, or your CPU specifically, can go, and how many instructions a CPU can execute. But again, other factors like architecture, how new the actual processor is, and how much power actually takes up will be probably a bigger thing when figuring out which CPU to go for yourself, or which CPU you want to put in someone else's system. So for CPUs, let's say you're uh, you're like an IT specialist in a business, and you're working at like a video production company, let's say, and one of the employees is saying, is telling you like, yeah, it's running super slow in Adobe Premiere. It's not going, it's just chugging along. The processing speeds are very slow, and it's all not running very smoothly. And you see that they have, let's say, like a 4-core CPU in there. Of course, a 4-core when doing not higher end, but higher difficult processes like video production is not going to be a good choice for that system. You're going to probably want, I believe Adobe recommends a 6-core or above, but you should generally put like an 8-core or above in it, or even you can put these newer 12th gen and above Intel CPUs because they have processing cores and efficiency cores. So generally those might be a little bit better than Ryzen because you generally have more cores than Intel CPUs nowadays, but it's hard to say without knowing the specifics of what the customer needs and what you have in stock and etc. All right. Now next on to one of the main components, or I should say one of the biggest components, like by size, of the computer, and that's going to be the motherboard. It is also known as the main board or system board. This is an extremely vital component within a computer that serves as a central hub connecting and integrating various hardware components. It provides the foundation upon which all other components are mounted and interconnected. Think of it as almost like the nervous system of the computer, facilitating communication and data exchange between different parts of the system. So pretty much always a motherboard is going to be a flat rectangular circuit board that fits inside a computer case. There's different sizes of motherboards. Like ATX is the main size. Then you have MATX, which stands for micro ATX, and you have ITX, which is a smaller perfect square board. Those are the 3 general sizes you're going to see. There's a few others that are similar or just slightly different than those 3, but those are going to be the main 3 sizes. On the board itself, you're going to have this thing called a CPU socket. It's where your actual CPU goes. Depending on the generation of CPU and motherboard and what type of CPU motherboard combo you have, is going to depend if your CPU has pins in it or the motherboard or the CPU socket on the motherboard is going to have pins in it. So it's just another thing you have to slightly look out with and make sure you know it. So let's say you get a Ryzen like 3600X or whatever, and you get like an Intel motherboard. Those two aren't going to work competitively because the CPU socket won't fit the actual CPU, and it doesn't actually have the correct software on it to make it work all together. Then usually to the right of the CPU, I'm saying this usually because there are some motherboards that are slightly different, so your mileage may vary on this actual guide. So there's usually to the right, but it's going to be RAM slots. The motherboard has slots for installing RAM, which stand for Random Access Memory Modules. RAM provides temporary storage for data and programs that the CPU is actively using. Then below the actual like CPU port, or not CPU port, the CPU socket, you're going to have expansion slots or PCIe slots, which are things where your graphics card, sound cards, networks card, capture cards, all your things that have PCIe or PCI connectors are going to go into there. Then you're going to have storage connectors, which are usually like this gray box with like right angle ports on the side that have SATA connectors, and SATA connectors are usually or pretty much always for storage, for connecting SATA data cables to actual storage. So right here, this is a SATA data cable. You want to connect one of these ends to actual motherboard and the other end to the actual hard drive or SSD you're connecting to. Then on the motherboard, it might have a slot for M.2 storage, which is M.2 is a format and not an actual type of drive, you can say. It's a format of a drive, not like an SSD, NVMe, or HDD. We're going to go more into storage later, so I'm not going to give a high-end explanation here. Then you're going to have power connectors. You're going to have a 24-pin, which connects from your motherboard to your power supply. You're going to have an usually a 4-pin or a dual 4-pin / 8-pin connector from your motherboard to your actual power supply again, and this is going to be mainly power for the CPU. Then you're going to have your front panel connectors, which are usually in, if you're looking on the motherboard like this, just right up, it's going to be in the bottom right usually, or usually just on the bottom at all, usually on the bottom right. But these front panel connectors, it's going to connect like your hard disk, your hard drive, just LSD, your power LED, audio jacks, power button, reset button for your case. Then you're going to have USB ports, so you have some people have a Thunderbolt connector on there as well, but it's mainly going to be USB 3 and USB 2 ports, which you connect to either your front panel or you connect to your case, and it lets you use the USB ports on your actual case. Then on the rear I/O of the motherboard, you're going to have USB, maybe some display ports, or not display ports, what is it called? Like ports that you use, like HDMI, display port, things like that on the back of it, as well as USB ports. It might have a power reset button, but we're not going to go into that today. That's a little bit more in depth than we need to today. Then it's going to have a network jack and RJ45 port, which is for your Ethernet port. Some motherboards have Wi-Fi included with them. You're going to need to look on the proper documentation of the motherboard to see if it does. Then motherboards have this thing called chipsets on them. A chipset is a set of integrated circuits that manage communication between the CPU, memory, storage, and other components on the motherboard. Some motherboards, or a lot of motherboards nowadays, they have integrated audio. Some might have graphics capabilities. A lot of them don't anymore, or some of them don't anymore, but if yours won't have a display port or an HDMI port on it usually, but generally most motherboards nowadays, they support both sound and audio on it. But if your CPU doesn't support graphics on it, like you say you have a non-APU version of a Ryzen, so like a 5900X, with Ryzen, if it doesn't end with G, it's not going to have it. It's not going to have actual integrated graphics onto it. But most Intel CPUs are going to have it unless the SKU has an F on it. If the SKU has an F on it, that means it has no integrated graphics. So in essence, a motherboard acts as the central nervous system of a computer, providing a platform for all the components to interact and function together. It facilitates data transfer, power distribution, and communication between different hardware essentials, enabling the computer to perform a wide range of tasks efficiently. So now one of the other core components of a computer is going to be the RAM, or random access memory. It is a type of computer memory that plays a crucial role in performance and functionality of a computer. It serves as temporary storage area where data and instructions are stored for the CPU to access quickly while actively executing tasks. RAM is distinct from permanent storage devices like HDDs and SSDs, as it provides faster access time but does not retain data when the computer is turned off. One thing about RAM is memory hierarchy. Computers use a memory hierarchy to manage data at different speeds and capacities. RAM sits between high-speed, small capacity CPU registers and the slower, larger capacity performance permanent storage devices like hard drives. RAM does store data that the CPU needs to access, but it's mainly for quick and active tasks. This includes program instructions, application data, and operating system components. The CPU retrieves data from RAM much faster than any other storage device because it's directly connected using PCIe lanes on the actual motherboard. Unlike other storage like a hard drive, which is connected via a SATA cable to the motherboard, then it goes. It's just less steps of memory, so it's generally faster. RAM is temporary storage, meaning it loses all its contents when the computer is powered off or restarted. In RAM's name, random access memory, random access, it signifies that any part of the memory can be accessed directly and quickly without needing to read through the entire memory sequentially. Also, RAM allows both read and write operations, meaning data can be retrieved from it as well as ran to it during program execution. RAM enables efficient multitasking where the computer can run multiple applications simultaneously. Each running application is loaded onto the RAM, allowing the CPU to switch between tasks quickly. Operating systems also use a portion of the hard drive as virtual memory when the available physical RAM becomes insufficient. Virtual memory allows the system to temporarily move data between RAM and storage to ensure that applications continue running. When you're searching for buying RAM or searching what RAM a component has, RAM comes in various speeds, indicated in megahertz or gigahertz. Higher speed RAM can provide better performance, especially in tasks that involve large data transfers. So again, back to our scenario where you're working as an IT specialist at a production company. For people doing like a video editor, they're going to need a higher amount of RAM because their processes take more RAM. They take, depending on the program itself, it either takes higher speed RAM or it takes higher capacity RAM and uses more RAM capacity or it needs more RAM capacity than other systems. So generally, you just want to look at what programs they're doing and base your decisions of what RAM to put in there based on what the actual software they're using. The software, like Adobe, it's going to say on their website what RAM they recommend and what RAM they prefer and the minimum requirements for it. So you just need to be aware of what programs the people at your company are using and decide which RAM speed and how much RAM that system actually needs. In summary, RAM serves as a fast and temporary workspace for the CPU, allowing it to efficiently access and manipulate data during active tasks. It's a crucial component for overall system performance and smooth operation of applications and operating systems. Now we're on to storage. Storage plays a very important role in a computer. It stores all the data you want to save, and you actually need it to actually run the system. The OS does take maybe 50 gigabytes off your system, and it doesn't take too much, but it is needed, and you need to download it. There's 3 main types of storage that you're going to see, and that's going to be hard disk drives or HDDs. They're traditional mechanical storage with a spinning disk. There's SSDs or solid state drives. They're faster, more reliable storage with no moving parts. Then you have NVMe SSDs. It's even faster storage that connects directly to the motherboard. There are going to be things like you are going to see a lot. There are different formats like the M.2 format, which pretty much all NVMe drives are going to be in the M.2 format unless you're doing enterprise, like dealing with enterprise servers. But if you're going to be dealing with enterprise servers, you probably don't need this course, so I'm not going to be going over that today. There are SSDs in the M.2 format, as well as NVMe's in the M.2 format. There's a big way to tell the difference because they are keyed at the end. So with a SATA SSD, it's going to have 2 indents on it, while an NVMe one is going to have 1 indent on it. You just want to make sure when you're purchasing or looking at it to make sure you have the right drive, because there is some compatibility issues with SSDs in the M.2 format. They generally do not like USB 4.0 ports. They usually don't like 3.0 ports. They more like 2.0 ports. So if you put it like a M.2 SSD in the first M.2 port of your computer, it sometimes won't boot correctly, especially if that actual SSD has your OS on it. It won't boot properly. Like I've had that issue in the past. You have to put it in your secondary port, which generally goes at a lower speed than the main port. But if you have this compatibility issue, you want to look at the papers and the guides, the motherboard, and the actual on your motherboard information packet that it gives you with the motherboard. It's going to tell you what speeds the ports run at and what things you could generally put into it. So it's just another thing you have to look out for. Our next component is going to be a component that's probably my favorite component in a computer, and that's going to be the GPU, or the graphics processing unit. It is a specialized electronic circuit that's designed to accelerate the creation of rendering images, videos, and animations. GPUs are primarily used for graphical tasks such as rendering graphics in video games, processing visual effects in movies, and performing complex calculations and scientific simulations. They work in conjunction with the CPU to offload graphic-related tasks and significantly enhance the performance quality of the visual content. One of the primary functions of a GPU is to render graphics. That involves creating images by calculating the colors and positions of the pixels on the screen based on 3D models, textures, lighting effects, and other visual elements. GPUs excel at rendering 3D graphics, allowing video games and applications to display realistic and immersive environments. They handle tasks like geometric processing, shading, and rasterization. GPU accelerate video playback and editing by decoding and encoding video formats, applying real-time effects, and enhancing video quality. They also do a lot of other things like mining crypto, virtual reality, machine learning, AI, but I will not be going into that today. We already talked a little bit about integrated graphics, but some CPUs have included graphics, which is called integrated graphics, which are a lot less powerful than a GPU, but they're suitable for basic things like scrolling the internet, looking at files, etc. But if you're going to be video editing, gaming, recording video, streaming, things like that, you're going to need a dedicated GPU to actually run all those processes. So in summary, a GPU is a specialized hardware component designed to process and render graphics and visual content efficiently. Its parallel processing power and specialization in graphical tasks make it a cornerstone of modern computing, powering everything from video games to scientific research and artificial intelligence applications. So next we have the power supply, or the PSU, which is also known for the power supply unit. It just supplies all the power to all the components in the system. The real only thing you need to remember for it is the actual cables that connect to it, and you kind of just need to remember what actual cables you need to plug into the system and which ones you don't. So I have a couple of the cables here. First, let me just show you a power supply. So this is the Corsair RM650X. This is a 650 watt power supply. The quality is a gold quality. So PSUs have qualities like it goes from bronze, gold, platinum, etc. So you kind of just want to get something that's gold or above. And for wattage, it depends on your system. If you're running higher end thing, if you're running, let's say, like a 3090 in like a Ryzen 9 15, like a Ryzen 9 or Intel i9, you're gonna need an 1,000 watt power supply or more. And that's before adding all the power into your fans and etc. Maybe like an 850 or 900 would work, but you should get a 1,000 watt power supply. You need that extra headroom because 3090's peak in power, but I digress on that. It kind of depends on what parts you have in the system, depending on the wattage. I'm just going to show you a couple of the cables, the main ones. So this first one, let's show you this one. This is the power cord. Plug it into the wall, then this plugs into the back of your power supply, like this. Like this. Then you plug this side into the wall. Then this is the power on switch button that you need to press to turn it on. Then this, or there's actually, I should say this, there is 3 types of power supply. Or not 3 types. There's 3 types regarding these front ports right here. Some, or a lot of power supplies are going to be what they call not modular, which they won't have these ports on it. This is a modular power supply. Modular means I could choose which cables I plug in and which cables I don't. Some are going to be semi-modular. Usually semi-modular is probably where you want to go, In a lot of cases, you want to go semi-modular or modular. It just makes it easy for cable management. But semi-modular, it's going to have the non-modular part. It's going to be the 24 pin and the CPU pin, maybe a graphics one, and that's going to be it. So just going over these ports, this is an 8 pin. This is for a CPU. Then it's greatly labeled, so you go plug it in on this side. Usually they're going to be labeled, so this side this says CPU, so this side goes on the CPU, and this side plugs into the motherboard. So plug it in like that, then plug this cable into the CPU power port on your motherboard. So then let's do the 24 pin next. Okay, we have this 24 pin. This is going to be the only one that has that many power connectors on it. So again, you're going to check out which side goes in which side. So this side, it goes like this. You see on this power supply, it has the 24 pin is split into, I believe, what is that? A 9 or 8 pin, 18 and 6 or 10. So you plug this port in, this side in, go like that. Then you plug the other half of the 24 pin in on there. Then you plug this side into the motherboard. Then there's going to be other ports like this one. You see this connector on here. Then this side plugs into the power supply. This is a Molex connector. You're going to need this for like CD drives, things like that. And a bunch of older hardware. This doesn't really get used anymore. You're mainly going to see these, which are called SATA, which is SATA power cables. Again, you plug this little port into the power supply. Then you have all these connectors for your hard drives, your SATA drives, and I believe some like water cooling pumps. You need these. Uses SATA. Other than that, that's going to be all the real main components of the power supply unit. Next, we have the case, the computer case. The computer case just holds all the components, and the case itself, it actually serves a couple other purposes than just holding all the components. While that is one of the major factors of it, it keeps in this nice contained area, and it limits dust actually going into your system, which could be harmful potentially if there's too much dust. And it makes it so it's in its own environment, so outside weather doesn't really get affected by it. And so you could, so it's in its own environment. You could change the cooling to how you want the cooling to work in the actual PC case. So it's like this own little atmosphere that you can control the weather in, you can say. So like in my case, I have fans on the bottom pushing up fresh cold air to the top, going with the process of heat rising. So fans top, fans bottom. All my components are on the inside here. So fresh air goes over it, then goes out of it through the top. And I'm using that with the process of heat rising and using fans to help push the air forward. Computer cases, they come in all different sizes and shapes. Computer cases are pretty personal to the person, so if you're building like a gaming computer for someone, you want to ask them to pick out a case for themselves. That's what I usually do, because that's going to be the main thing they're going to be looking at their entire time. Like all the other components, you can, for the most part, you can care less about. They're all going to generally look decent together if you cable manage correctly, but if the case looks garbage, the pretty much whole system is going to look bad. Unless you do like sleeper build stuff, like doing a 3090 in an Optiplex case, but most people don't have the time to do things like that. But the computer case is just the main looks. It holds all the compartments, and it creates a good old pressure system in the computer. So that's gonna be pretty much all for this video. We covered a lot today. There's still a lot more in computer hardware that you need to know. And a good thing to keep in mind is that specific components and their configuration can vary based on the intended use of the computer and personal preferences. And not all parts are going to be exactly the same. Like, one CPU might differ from a different CPU of the same exact type of CPU, or one 3090 might give higher test results from a different 3090 or 90. It just all kind of depends, and something that you're going to build upon in your career. With that knowledge, with this basic knowledge, you're kind of going to get through like the first week, and you're going to be learning a lot after this. This is kind of just a good starting point for all of you. Well, other than that, thank you guys. Have a good rest of your guys' day, and we're going to be posting another video this upcoming Thursday. Have a good one.